Hello everyone, I'm Milo and welcome to my town, and welcome to this episode of The Completion's Way, a series that I am officially starting now, where I share some of my experiences and tips on completing certain video games. I would say that the first unofficial episode of this series was the video that I made last year about HARUKA'S requests in Yakuza 3 Remastered. In that video I went in a full in-depth guide about an optional mode that is in that game, which is the HARUKA'S Trust, which is something that not a lot of people seem to notice or care, but it's actually quite hard in the requirements that it asks. So I took it upon myself to cover it and give an in-depth guide into some of the requirements, trying to make it much easier for people if they see the tips that I provide. And I'm quite proud of that work. Now we are in the follow-up game to that one, Yakuza 4 Remastered. While I was playing through this game, I was thinking that I could potentially make a sequel video to that one if something similar were to happen. But as it turns out, it looks like the game developers realized how extreme they were with the requirements that they asked in 3, because here in 4 they were severely reduced and much easier to do. So instead what I decided to do was actually cover the overall completion of the game in the different areas that it has, and what I want to do in this video is provide some tips for some of the harder or more tricky or annoying stuff that the game has. I will try to touch slightly on all of the topics of the game, but will mainly just go in depth into the things that are worth more talking about. So without further ado, let's begin. So in this game, besides the story progression, the other content that you can track are the Substories and the completion list. There are some achievements as well that can be found on the different platforms, and most of them can be easily acquired while doing some of the stuff that I will just touch on. So if there's any outliers or something that's more specific, I will talk about it or briefly display it on the screen. Starting with the Substories, I think there's not much to discuss. Every character has 16 Substories besides Saejima, who only has 15. And when you complete all of them, switch to Kiryu and then enter Serena, and you will get to begin the final substory, which is as usual with the M1 clan. I don't believe that any of the substories are particularly hard. There aren't any crazy requirements like getting a low score in golf like the last game, so not much to discuss in here. Then moving on to the completion list, we can begin from here. The first one is the locker keys. There are 50 of them which are lying in the main Kamurocho ground, including inside certain buildings, and there is another 50 that are found in the underground or even in the rooftop areas. These aren't that hard to find. There is a key finder item that you can get for free from a guy near the Taihei Boulevard lockers, or you can buy additional ones from Ebizopon, and if not, you can just look up a guide online. I recommend getting all of these before you do some of the other stuff, because their content can help us in stuff like the gun crafting. The next one is eating at every restaurant and having every meal. Again, something that's quite easy. If you want to speed this up, you can go to the docks and buy some bait. I believe squids are some of the easiest ones. When you eat this, you will actually lose health, so you can then go to restaurants and buy more items to fill up this completion list. I personally just did this naturally while I was playing the main game whenever I was low on health, but you can do it whichever way you want. Weapon crafting or modding is the next one, and this one is actually worth going into. So during the story you will be able to meet two of the Kamiyama brothers. One of them is in his usual spot in the back alley of Park Boulevard, while the other you will meet during Saejima's part of the story, and he will set up near the rooftop of the volcano. Before you begin the process of crafting all of the weapons, I would recommend that you prepare yourself so that you can minimize traveling to other places beforehand. The first thing that you'll need is weapon designs. You can get weapons designs by talking to each of the two Kamiyama brothers as each of the 4 characters. Additionally, you can buy some as each character in the store Beam that is located in Pink Street. Finally, there are some others that are given as rewards from Substories from all of the 3 characters, as well as the completion reward that you can get from Kiryu's and Saejima's Substories. You can pick those up from Bobu Tsunomiya. In case you don't know where he is, in this building in Tenkaichi Street, it's called Naomi's Palace. You can go in here actually, and he will always be there. He will provide you some item packs if you haven't beaten the game. He will provide you some extra item packs if you have beaten the game, which contains some really useful items that we will need for the gun crafting. And additionally, for every section of the completion list that you do, you will get an email or a note if you are playing as Sajima, and you can claim the items from him in there. As I said, we need the Kiryu and Sajima's full sub-story complete in order to get some catalogs. Once we have all of the designs, it's time to get the materials. So there are different amount of stores that you can get them from, and they really spread them up so that you would go all around town to get them. The stores that you will need to visit are the following ones. The 3 Popo convenience stores, one in Tenkaichi Street, Showa Street, and Nakamichi Alley. At the M store, Don Quixote in Nakamichi Street, Ebisu Pawn, Kotobuki Drugs, the Green store in the sewer system under Million Tower, the weapon vendor that is located on the rooftop. You first have to talk to him in this parking lot near Pink Street. After that, he will be located in the rooftops in the eastern part of town. You also need to fish for a squid and a marlin because they are materials for the crafting of the guns. In the Dragon Palace Casino, you can exchange for a low amount of chips, a material that you need in there, and in the Coliseum exchange as well. Don't worry about the Coliseum stuff because by doing the battles that you need, you get enough points to get what you need. From Le Marché you need a single item, I think, and finally the stuff that you get from the extra packs from Bambutsu no Miya. There are some items that you can get elsewhere, but he hands you in there, so I will be taking those into account. What I recommend is that I'm gonna be providing a link to a GameFAQs page that has all of the crafting recipes. You should go to each of the stores that I mentioned and look through the items that are clearly crafting ones, so you can ignore stuff like food. Then Ctrl F in the GameFAQs page and look up each of the materials and count how many you need from the recipes. Then buy as many as you need if you don't have any amount of them already, and pretty much have all of the materials that you will need ready beforehand. I also forgot to mention that on Tanimura's and Kiryu's side businesses of the police scanner and gang encounters, you can get some additional materials that you can exchange from the guy in Theater Square. In the case of Tanimura, they are randomly selected from a pool, and for Kiryu there is just 4 items that he can exchange for 5 emblems. I will detail more about this in the later section, but just keep that in mind. If I'm not mistaken, all I needed to buy for myself was a high voltage battery from Kiryu, because you are given only one elsewhere and you need like 2. But I think that's it. From the rest of the stores, it's pretty simple to just buy them with money, and hopefully you will do this after you have done some casino gambling and you have some disposable income. From the Coliseum, I recall that I only had to buy 2 Bloody Clots and 1 additional Demon Stone, as well as 2 plastic shin guards, which I believe aren't acquired anywhere else in the game. I believe this only costed me like 82,000 points, and you can get enough points while doing the Coliseum fights normally, so don't worry about grinding if you just want to craft them once. The final thing to note is that the weapon vendor will sell different weapons depending on which character goes, so you need to visit that van in the rooftops with every character and make sure you buy enough of the weapons that are required as bases. And the final thing is that in Ebisu Pawn there is an item that you can buy called the Nameless Katana, but it looks like it's only going to be sold to Sajima. I went as Kiryu and maybe some other characters and they didn't have it, so just go as Sajima for this one. I think you just need 1. And besides that, I think that's it. So you just collect all of the materials that you need, and then you go to the Kamiyama brother in the Park Boulevard. He's gonna be taking care of guns. You will likely need a lot of guns that you craft as materials for future ones. And for gear, you go on top of the volcanic volcano pachinko parlor and you craft them there. I don't really believe that it should be all that difficult to get. Like, there weren't any heavy grindy materials, maybe just the fishes. The marlin is one of the harder catches that are out there, and I'll just mention it briefly. One of Haruka's requests is to actually catch a marlin, but you do not get to keep that one, so you do need to do it twice at least, one that you get in your inventory and you need to do it again afterwards. But with that said, I believe that's all for the weapon and crafting. You just have to have them all ready and keep them in there. In case you're missing some materials, hopefully you don't accidentally craft something twice and miss out on materials that you have, especially since some of them are a bit rarer than others. Either way, in the link that I'm gonna provide you for the recipes, you can actually see other ways of getting some specific stuff. So if you get stuck on something, you can get it from another source anyway. Next is the allies. This can only be done as Akiyama. You just have to go to like the businesses that are listed here and talk to the guys or buy from them 3 times. I guess the hardest one is the taxi. It needs to be from the Hoto District one. You need to arrive there after like taking about 5 taxis and he will become your friend. For the Club Sega one, you need to play Boxcelios 2 3 times, and when you do, he becomes your friend, as well as you unlock Boxcelios 1 in both of the Sega arcades. Next is Revelations, and I'm not really gonna detail too much. As all characters except Saejima, you get a notification of your phone and where you can find them, and as Saejima you need to talk to the guy that's in the sewers with the master. But they're overall not that hard. If you find people with like red text boxes in town, then there's a revelation nearby. With Saejima there's one that he needs to go to the docks, and I believe for Akiyama and Kiryu there's one in the eastern rooftops. So that's it. The following one is minigames, but I want to save this one for last, so let's continue on. The next 3 ones are the hostess section. The first one are the hostess both in the Club Shine and Jewel, which can be requested by Kiryu, Tanimura and Akiyama. It's the business as usual. You have to talk to them, answer their questions the way that they want to hear them. You will build their bond meter and eventually have dates with them, and at the end you will have some sort of sub-story and have a sexy time with them. And after you get their email in the end with a picture, that completes their thing. The second one is the Hostess Maker Hostesses that can be dated by Tanimura and Kiryu. Akiyama doesn't date them because he's the owner of the club that they work on, Elise. And then comes the actual Hostess Maker part. I will do a slow detailed thing on this one. So the Hostess Maker comes back from Yakuza 3, where it was a sub-story that you could find in Okinawa. In there were 5 possible girls that you could find around town and race to be number 1. The sub-story would be completed when you only did 1, but you could do all 5 if you wanted. They brought it back here and it's introduced in the main story from Akiyama. Near the end of his story you will get a call from the manager of Elise telling you to go to the club, and if you go then you will need to find a girl out of 3 possible options that are in town to recruit as a hostess. The first one is called Hiyori and you can find her outside of Millennium Tower. Next is Kyoko, who will be inside the Bantam bar, and finally Nanami, who is gonna be in Kue's bar in the underground mall. You can approach the one that you want and talk to her to recruit her into the club, and then the other ones won't be there until you finish with them. The way that the Hostess Maker works is a little bit more annoying than it was in 3, because in there was a dress and makeup combination that could actually get you max stats in everything. I don't know if they saw that and tried to change it, but I don't believe that you can do that here. Or at the very least I did an experiment, because honestly I just followed the guide. In the guide they mention 3 set pieces that can get you the customers that ask for specific styles to be pleased. There is one for the gorgeous and flashy one for cute, and one for refined. What you need to do in the minigame is go out before a shift and gouge out what the customers want. You will see it in the text bubbles. Then you go in and you hopefully change your hostess into the style that they want that will make them be requested more. And they may change in the middle of shifts, so usually what I would do is that for the first shift there's only gonna be one style that's gonna be requested. On the second one you will still hear speech bubbles for that style and there might be another one. And usually by the third one they're gonna be more vocal about the other style, so I would change them into that. It's a bit annoying because there's a whole cutscene animation of you changing dresses, so you have to see it at least once, sometimes twice in a work session that you do, and it can take some time, but well, it is what it is. Additionally, you can increase the stats of your hostesses by training them before a shift. This can be done by giving them tips on this specific thing, but I do believe that after a couple of work sessions you will actually be given the lecture option and some of the relax. I think the best strategy is to use lecture, then free time, then relax. If you do that, then they will have high motivation and overall low stress, so you can just do that after they go. Once they finally reach S rank in all 3 stats, then you are done, and at that point you can balance in between not giving them anything and making them, I don't know, free time or relax. The idea is that as they get to S rank, they will naturally start getting up to like number 2 in the club, and then they need a shift where they have low stress and high motivation, and that should get them to become number 1. And at that point is where it ends, and they will later become available as dateable hostesses by Kiryu and Tanimura. It is a bit annoying and can take some time at times, but well, it is what it is. Now before we end, this is actually the only instance of a missable achievement that this game has. The achievement is called Fashionista, and what it wants of you is to own at least one of every dress in the wardrobe. You don't need all the colors, all you actually need is at least one of each. There are 23 total dresses, and every 3 shifts or so you should be getting new items from your wardrobe. The only way that you can buy a dress is by trying to use it on your next shift, so whenever you get new ones I recommend first putting on the dress that you want for the specific style that customer requests. I guess I haven't said it, but you are able to actually save dress combinations, so you should do that for the 3 that you need. Then once you have that, simply swap out the actual dress for a new one, and that way you will actually purchase it. I'm gonna put on screen the 3 dresses that you get last. So if you don't have these dresses by the time that you get to your 3rd girl, I recommend going a little bit slow, like not actually matching the theme of what customers want for a little bit. Stall for time until you actually get the dresses, and when you get them and you unlock the achievement, at that point you can just full throttle and finish the mode. It really can be a hassle. I believe it took me like 5 or 6 hours to do it completely, and it was boring. But well, it's one of the things in the game, so what can you do about it? The next 3 are the different masters that can teach moves to Akiyama, Sajima and Tanimura respectively. They are all introduced in the main story of each of these characters, and you just have to go to them and do their different training courses or requests. For Akiyama, it's gonna be Saigo, who is in the rooftop at the side of the Sega arcade in the theater square. I don't believe he's all that terrible, at most just bring some heals because there are some missions where he's shooting you with a machine gun, but as long as you survive and beat him in the fight and you win, it is not that bad. For Sajima is the master who is in the sewers under Millennium Tower. For this one you have to break walls and then defend the master while he is mining. There is one point where you will need to find a chunk of wood ash, and I believe this one can come from a locker key, but if you have already collected or maybe used the material, you can also get it from the batting center. If you score in between 2000 and 2300 points, you will get the chunk of wood ash. You need to give this to Kameyama and he will make a pickaxe so you can move on with the mode. And I believe later on you need to make a bomb, and you only need batteries that you can buy at convenience stores. So okay, maybe that will offset you on the gun crafting in case you have done it before this, which probably not, but whatever. And then it's just pretty easy, just get to the rest of the stages and you will complete this one. For Nair's training, that is for Tanimura, it's inside Little Asia in a small room. Her sparings could be a little bit annoying because she can parry just like Tanimura, but I found that you can just infinite combo her by doing the first stage of a rush combo then a heavy attack. That knocks her to the ground, and then you do the same move again as she's getting back up, and you can just combo this until she's knocked out. You do this and then her little story progresses a little bit, at which points there's sometimes where you won't be able to spar with her anymore. You need to go out into town and you will get police scanner things that when you complete them you're gonna get some information on the perpetrator that she's chasing. I believe this happens twice, so just when you can't spar with her you need to go and do that, and at the end you have to fight the perpetrator, and that's it. It's actually not that hard either. On the final row we have the Coliseum. We had to beat all cops with both Sajima and Kiryu. There are a total of 13, but Kiryu only accesses 12 because he's already the champion or something like that. As for Sajima, the final one only unlocks when he has beaten, I think it's every other one, or it may just be the one before it. Once you finally have unlocked it, I recommend you save before trying it out, because if you lose it, you actually have to beat the previous cup again in order to have access to it again. I think it's a bit dumb, but if you just don't wanna waste any time, you can just do that. The final cup is just a fight again, Ivan Ibrahimovic. I believe it's gonna be him every time, and if you beat that one, then it's always just one enemy and they have more health than they would usually have in Coliseum matches. But you just didn't need to do it once anyway, so that's up to you if you wanna do it more. Overall, I don't feel like the Coliseum matches were that hard. I didn't really struggle with any of them. Maybe I lost once and that's it, so not that big of a deal. You don't need to do it with both of the characters, and as I mentioned earlier, just doing it with one character earns you enough Coliseum points to buy the stuff that I mentioned for the gun crafting, and you're left with even more. So if for some reason you need to buy more stuff from there, you probably are gonna have more than enough to do it. Next up is the Fighter Maker, which is something taken in a similar vein to the Hostess Maker, but this time around is for Saejima. Again, he finds it as part of the story, and he needs to train some apprentices from a dojo in order for them to become the champions of the Rookie Cup on the Coliseum. For this one I followed the guide, but I don't think it's all that necessary. If you want, follow it, but just for the first one, because what they do in that one is that they build up the first apprentice, which is called Hideo. He's a very balanced one, and what they do is they just farm money with him. They send him to like every foreseeable tournament when he's strong enough, and then you get like all of the money that you're gonna be needing for the rest of the mode. Once you have money, you can upgrade the facilities. In the guide that I followed, and it's kinda true, they don't use the trainings that may reduce your other stats, only the ones that may only improve them. So if you want, just improve those, or if you have spare money, you can improve all of them. Only until you beat the third pupil and complete him, you can upgrade your stuff to the max, and every time that you upgrade the facilities, you can pretty much just raise the stat of the fighters faster. Once a specific stat, if you're doing a training and you notice that it's not improving anymore, then that is the max. You can also hear Sodachi's comments, and he will say when he needs some work in some stat, or if he's good in someone but he can be improved, or he will say when he's perfect. At that point, that means that his stats are maxed. And when they are maxed, you can just send them to the tournament. It's the final training one, and if he wins, then you are done with him and you move on to the next one. It's a little bit more engaging, and maybe it goes a bit faster, even though there's more to do than in Hostess Maker, but at least it wasn't as boring at that one. If you want, just follow the guide to get like the initial skills and master all of the finishing moves that they can earn. I think one of the best ones is the clothes leaning one. That one does a lot of damage, should do like more than half of the health of each of the enemies when you pull it off. And when their stats are full, you can simply send them to the tournament. You don't even need to send them to the smaller matches. You can just train them fully and send them, and that's it. The next two are the police scanner and the gang encounters that are exclusive to Tanimura and Kiryu respectively. They work kind of the same. They have to do with the Kamurocho guard guy who is dressed in red in the theater square. He will approach both of them when they are close to the theater square, and they will tell them about the problems that Kamurocho has been having with violence and with gangs instead of Kiryu. And for Tanimura, what he needs to do is just answer the police scanners, the requests that appear, and once you've done a specific amount of them, you will be called by email with this guy, and then you do some sort of events with him. I believe the total amount of incidents you need to resolve is 22 to completely finish this thing. As for Kiryu, he has to handle gangs. They always dress distinctively, and when you defeat a couple of encounters of each of them, they will tell you where their boss is. You need to go to the place and beat up their boss, and that band will disband, and then you continue with the next one. When you finish with all of them, well, even before, but you may start to see some remnants of the previous bands that you have already beaten, and when you beat those, you are gonna get a gang emblem. This is an item. If you have 5 of these, you can exchange them from the guy at Theater Square. There is one achievement that wants you to have 10 in your inventory, so I would recommend not redeeming any until you get this, and then you can redeem them. As I said, you do need to redeem like a high voltage battery. You can get it easily from here, but besides that, I didn't really need to do much of this, so these ones go relatively fast. For Tanimura, I even completed it while I was in the story part of him. For Kiryu, I did it afterwards. Just don't bring Haruka around because they will not spawn. Just as a precaution, if you want to complete this, don't have Haruka around. And that should be it, it's relatively easy. Then we have the IF-7R. So the IF-7 comes back from Yakuza 3, this time it's located in the theater underground. The way this works is that first you have to input as each of the characters, and that will add to the machine some of the bosses that they fought in the game for you to challenge. There is also a function where you can invest, and the most that you need to invest is 700,000 yen in total. And once you do that, you will be able to input information about the characters themselves. So you need to go as each of the 4 characters, and they will input the information so you can be able to fight Akiyama, Saejima, Tanimura and Kiryu within the machine. For the completion you only need to beat each opponent once. There are 6 opponents that are main story bosses and then the 4 additional ones which are the main characters. You just need to defeat them once each and that will give you the completion mark. However, each character does get upgrades to their hit bar if they defeat every individual character, so if you wanna do the 40 battles, 10 with each character, you can do that, it's up to you. Afterwards, if you do any other character that you have already beaten, Minamida will give you an item out of a pool that he has. There are some rare ones in here, but I never really needed to do this, so yeah, but it's there if you need it. The final item before we go back to minigames is the hit actions. Now, you are probably going to do roughly half of the ones that are listed when you finish the game, maybe. If you've played previous Yakuza games, then there's a chance that if you seek completion in them, you may know some specific moves that you may have tried to seek out, some really specific situations. But there are still some that are a little bit harder than the others, and that's what I wanted to cover in this. These are the ones that maybe costed me a little bit or they are a bit special, so here they are. The first 2 are actually probably some of the hardest, well, I don't know. One is the rear head crush. In this one you need to grab an opponent from behind and use the hit action near some waist-like object. Now the thing is, I tried this a lot in Millennium Tower or other places. I tried in the railings in Theater Square, but those seem to trigger a different hit action, so it wasn't a good place. But I found one place where you can do it, and I'll read the next one first, which is the essence of throwing. This one can only be performed on rooftops. And what situation in the game allows you to have a fight on rooftops? If you think hard, maybe you will remember that there is one gang encounter boss that Kiryu faces in there, and that's it. There's never anyone in rooftops, so how can you do this? Well, there is one place that you can do it, and it is Saigo's training. For this one I went with the Sacred Tree armor set, which when you fully equip makes you immune to bullets. You will instantly block them and even gain hit if you have that upgrade. So in this one I chose suicidal training with Saigo. You take one of his apprentices near the railing here and then you grab him, and by using the hit action you're able to throw him, and that is that one. It's like probably the only scenario where you can replicate it because it's such a specific hit action and you have almost no chances of using it really outside of this. Then coming back to the rear head rush, I was actually able to do this one here. So for this one I defeated Saigo first because he has the machine gun, and then waited for the guys to shoot their gun, grab them from behind, and then in the railing that's on the other side I was able to get it there. Like, I tried in many other places and they didn't work. I don't know why. Then some other specific ones are maybe are not that hard, but you have this as a fence smashing and bashing. They are Coliseum exclusive and you need to grab an opponent from the front and back and be near the walls of the Coliseum. Then there's a lot of the weapon ones. So there are some rare weapons, and in the Street Fight Grand Prix you can find all of them. One of the most notorious ones is the syringe. You be careful with this one because apparently you can break it if you step over it. And also the rope. Like, I think the only other rope, according to the GameFAQs article that I read, is behind the Serena building, but I can't recall any fights that are able to be take place there, so this is the one that you're gonna be able to find, and you need to be behind the opponent to do the hit action itself. Okay, moving on, we have the essence of slamming back. This is in the power moves category, which mainly revolves about grabbing opponents in certain ways, and for this one you need to grab an opponent from the back and then use the hit action near an enemy that's on the ground. I tried to do this like manually by like throwing an opponent to the ground and hoping that another one would attack me while I was doing that, so I could quick step back behind him and grab him from there. But then I found out, because I digged a little bit and I found a Reddit post, that you can just grab any opponent from the back, so find that situation. Then by hitting the rush combo button you can actually kick another character, and apparently that action will always knock them, and then you can perform the hit action that way. That took me a lot of time to get, and then I read that tip and I was able to get it that way, so it's probably one of the harder ones, but this method helps you do it. Let's see, I have the car crushing one. In the article it says like a black car, but I think any regular car works. You may have to go to Shizufuku Street, that's where most of the cars are. There's others that are Coliseum tag team exclusive ones. You need your ally to grab them from the front and from the back. In order to do this, I mean, sometimes they will grab from the front, so if you have a heat, you try to be close to them and then do it. And from the back you should defeat one of the opponents, and then they're gonna focus you. And while you do that, try to get your ally to get close to them and grab them, and then you can perform the hit action. There is one for Kiryu and for Saejima, so you need to do this twice because it's the same of waiting that your ally grabs them from the front and from the back, but for Kiryu and Saejima their hit actions have different names, so you have to do it like that. For doing this I chose the second tag team partner, the second pupil that Saejima trains. I think he grabs quite often, so it worked. I didn't really try the other ones, but you can go with that one. I'm glad that it was able to go faster, because I remember in Yakuza 3 the allies would never grab the opponents. It would take so long for you to actually able to get these in Yakuza 3 because they really didn't like to grab. And then I guess the other ones that are a little bit specific are the ones from Saejima that require an enemy to bounce. So they bounce when they get hit by his charge attacks. Like they literally bounce a little bit, so one is done the close linking when they bounce from the ground, and then the other one you wanna be close to a wall, do your charge attacks, and they will bounce from the wall, and you can get it that way. And I think those are like some of the most challenging hit actions to do. Most of the other ones are easy, so you can read the article and try to see in your game which ones you're missing, and you should be able to find easy situations to do them. But the ones that I detailed were probably the ones that are the hardest to get or very specific, so that's why I wanted to share them here. Alright, and then the only thing that remains are the minigames. While we're here, I'll take the chance to explain a little bit of HARUKA'S requests. After all, she mainly asks for minigame stuff. So, in a nutshell, HARUKA'S requests in Yakuza 4 work pretty much the same that they did in Yakuza 3. They are a post-game activity only since Haruka isn't around for the main game. You can take her out while at News Arena while playing as Kiryu and go around town with her. As I had mentioned briefly before, it's best that you do this when you're only going to be doing minigame stuff or her requests, because taking her with you will not make any gang encounters appear or most Substories, I noticed. So just keep that in mind. The way that her quests work again is pretty much similar to 3, though this time around you don't really have to wait for her to get into the specific spot near an establishment. When she is close by, she will already have the globe of text above her head, and if you see that, then you can just go inside the establishment. It's a little bit of a quality of life improvement from the previous one. As for doing the tasks themselves, you start at rank F of her rank and a few activities are available. Once you do some of them, her rank will go up and new activities will open up. Overall, every minigame and establishment has about 2 things that she wants from them, and every time that she ranks up she will give you a reward. Simple stuff, no? Anyway, the easy tasks are the one where she just wants to buy stuff from establishments, so these ones are pretty easy and I will not really detail them. Next up is the actual minigames, so I'll just go over the list of all of the ones that are in the game, and whenever there is a Haruka requirement, I'll be mentioning it. Oh, and by the way, I did play the PC version on Steam, which for some reason cuts the pachinko minigames, so no luck for that one. I can't talk about them because I didn't even play them. Anyway, let's begin. First is the Aromatherapy Massage. You need to reach a specific score threshold and actually survive until the end. I say survive because if your bar goes too up or too low, then you will lose. Usually the first 2 difficulties aren't that bad. The third one you only unlock when you go 5 times, and there is an achievement that you get for it. And the fourth one, which is the hardest difficulty, unlocks when you go 10 times. It can be any massage. If you stay at the very top of the bar, then you will get the most score, but I believe that the one before it, it's a little bit safer and you can still get the score in all of the stages if you remain in there. I was a bit of a daredevil, and for the first 3 difficulties I did manage to stay at the top bar for the most of the minigames, but for the final one it's really fast when they change the speed and you can lose really easily. so I recommend just knowing more or less when the speed's gonna change and remain in the second to last bar, that is the most top one. You should be fine in there. It might take some tries because that stage is actually hard. Next is table tennis. This is located within the hot springs in Park Boulevard. You can go here normally or take out hostesses on dates when you are doing them. You are asked about the difficulty that you want to play before that, and you can do it even on the dates or just normally. There's 3 difficulties. The first one is not that bad, but the second and third could get a little bit more complicated. The idea is that you have to hold the button and then release it when the ball is glowing and coming your way. This will make it bounce. You can move it from side to side, but overall, depending on the difficulty, there's gonna be an approximate amount of balls in between you and your opponent before they mess up. You also have a hit bar that fills up as you play, and when it does, you can use a sort of hit action to spike the ball. There is an achievement for doing this 3 times during a single match. Now, what seems to be the best strategy for you to minimize error is that with one of the triggers you can actually concentrate your gaze in your opponent's chest. I thought this was just for fun, but turns out that this is the actual method that you can use to build a lot of hit. I found out that if you are about to hit the ball, hold the button and then release it. When you're ready to hit it, release it and immediately hit the trigger. This will cause the actual connection of the ball and your paddle to happen while you are in the gaze mode, and this will give you a bigger feeling on the hit bar. If you do this, then you can hit the spiking more often and potentially score more points, but be wary because in the higher difficulty there's a chance that they can actually bounce it back. It's not gonna be a guaranteed point. But if you are struggling, I suggest going for this. You do need to be careful, you can't just be gazing all the time, as you need to be responding to the ball. But overall, I found this one to be an easy strategy to get this if you are struggling with getting the timing on the ball. Next is darts in Bantam. For the completion list, I want you to beat the 3 different difficulties on 5 different types of games. The first one is 0-1, which is the one where you need to score a specific amount, like 301 or 501. The good thing is that unlike in Yakuza 3, where the difficulty determined the amount of points that you needed, here you can actually just choose 301 in every one if you want, and that makes it easier. I don't believe it's that bad. Then you have Cricket, which is the one where only certain lines are enabled and you need to hit them about 3 times for them to open, and then you can start getting points, but your opponent can close them if they hit them 3 times as well. Overall, the strategy should be to go for the higher point ones first, like triple 20 or the bullseye, and eventually if the CPU starts closing them, then go for the rest. There are 3 modes of this one. The first one is regular cricket, which is played with 15 through 20 and the bull. Random cricket just randomizes between the 21 possible point options, and then hidden cricket, they don't tell you which ones are open, so you spend a little bit of time, you and your opponent, figuring out which are open. Overall, I didn't feel like it was that bad, especially in the hidden cricket. The CPU will just spend most of its time trying to figure out where to shoot. And I feel like the difficulty for the dart CPUs was heavily reduced from the one in 3. Like, in 3 they were almost perfect in the hard one. In this one I didn't even struggle in a single match. So I do believe that they lowered a lot of these CPU difficulties in so many games. The final one is actually count up, which is just who gets the most, so that one is self-explanatory. There are 3 Haruka requirements for darts. One of them is to score 250 points in count up, which is really easy. The second one is to win 701 in 6 rounds, which is similar to the one that we had for the Big 4 in Yakuza 3, but they give you an additional round. But then for rank SSS, they actually want you to do the same but for 901. I don't really know if to say that this can be hard, but if you are able to consistently hit the triple 20s, then it should not be difficult. I think maybe round 6 is cutting it a little bit close, maybe you can't make too many mistakes, but I personally felt like the dart controls were very responsive in this game. Granted, I was using a mouse, but still, I feel like in some of the other Yakuza games so far, they were a little bit more finicky, but I didn't have any issues with this one, so I don't think it's gonna be all that bad. Next is Pool at QS Bar. In this one, in a similar vein, you have 4 different difficulties and 4 games, totaling 16 things you need to do. The games are 4-ball, 9-ball, 8-ball and rotation. In 4-ball you have to carom your cue ball with another one and hit a third one to get a point. There is an achievement for this one that tells you that you need to win the first point of a match. However, it actually unlocked for me after the opponent had scored first, so I don't know what's up with that. This one is not terribly hard, but it all depends in the locations of the balls after you play. In 9-ball you need to get the 9-ball in a hole to win, but you can only hit the lowest number of balls that's currently available. However, you are actually able to win this one if you get a break ace, which pretty much by hitting your first shot gets the 9-ball in. I tried the method that I used for Yakuza 3 and it still works, so I'll link the video that I uploaded showing that. You can use that and you can easily cheat for the difficulties like that. It's not that big of a deal. For 8 balls, all 15 balls are used and the players are split in between the holes and the stripe balls. You need to hit the ball type that corresponds to you and get only the holes before you are able to actually sink the 8 ball and win. Here it can be a little bit more difficult if you actually let the CPU get too ahead, as if they get too fast then you may actually lose. Finally, for rotation, you need to hit the balls in the order of their numbers from lowest to highest, and you get points based on any balls that you manage to get in by this vein. In this one as well, it is important to not let the CPU get too much ahead. If you get lucky and are able to get some of the high point balls in before they had to be hit by caroming or just hitting them from the beginning, then you will have an advantage, even that the first couple of balls won't actually sum that many points. These past 2 games can be a little bit more complicated, but overall, if you use the technique of using a ruler to try to determine the direction that the balls would take, then it can be a bit easier. This one needs some patience, but by using that trick, it's not gonna be incredibly impossible. For HARUKA'S trust, she's gonna ask that in playing 4-ball you get 2 consecutive points, which shouldn't be that bad, and in playing 9-ball get a game without any falls. If you get the break case, that you get this one simply, but if you don't, you can do it just regularly. Unless you get a really unlucky setup, 9-ball can be easily beaten without any faults. Next up is bowling. For the completion you just need to get a 200 or more score game, which doesn't sound that bad. For HARUKA'S request you need to beat her 3 different times, and this time around it's only a 3-frame game instead of a 10 one. Now the same method that I described on my Yakuza 3 video still applies, of getting the timing and the little bit of force that applies, but they changed the bowling a little bit and now you don't actually have the entire projection of where you are aiming, which sucks a little bit, but you can still pretty much see overall where the ball is going. So I don't believe it's all that bad. And the fact that in the games that you need to go against Haruka it's a 3-frame game only, it's way less nerve-wracking than having to land like 10 strikes in a single game, versus here you can just do 2 or 3 and you will most likely win. The hardest one that she gets is at the triple S rank, and she can sometimes get some strikes, but not always. She's not like guaranteed to do incredibly well. So if you struggle in that one, you can just keep retrying. She will not always be incredibly good at it, but she will score around 50 or so in the very last one. So yeah, overall I don't think there's too much challenge here either. Next is Karaoke. You only need to get 900 points in every song, which I don't believe is incredibly difficult. Haruka once again wants to get cheer done and get a high score, so the final one you need 950 points, but they brought back I Wanna Change Myself from Yakuza 3, which is still a really easy beatmap, so I think there is no issue in this one either. She has 2 other songs, one is Automate on My Life, which I believe this is the first time that it appeared, and also one that she shares with some hostesses, which I actually top scored in, so yeah, I don't think it's all that hard either, and this is one of the final tests that she asks. It's not the Autometal and Kiwami one, let me just tell you that, so you don't have to worry. Now we get into the gambling games. The good thing is that there are gambling items for some of these, but the bad thing is that for whatever reason they decided to double the amount that you need to win from Yakuza 3. A lot of them were earn 10,000 chips and now it's 20,000. Why? I have no idea. And this involves just grinding the mods a little bit more, especially some of the more annoying ones, because you don't earn that much. It's not that they're complicated, they're just gonna take a little bit more time. The first one is Cee-lo. Before you do that, I recommend that you enter the game and immediately exit it about 20 times. If you do this, then you will notice that your max amount of betting will be 1000 chips. If you do this, then everything's gonna be much faster. Also, I recommend that you have at least 10,000 or more tags on your possession, since that will make the characters that you're playing against to also have a good amount of chips to gamble with. Then you just have to play until you get a cumulative total of 20,000 in earnings. This one is not that bad, and you can use the cheating items that you see on screen. Some of them can also be used in Cho-han, so just keep that in mind if you want. Talking of which, it's the next one. Now Cho-han, I generally don't think it's all that terrible since it's just a 50%. I will often just bet the max amount and try to go for the side that has the least people betting on it, and eventually you will rack up. Every 5 or so rounds I recommend you back out of the game and go back in, because the max amount that you can bet can increase and that can help you get it faster. If you want, save some of the cheat items like the 1-1 gum or something like that to guarantee a good score once you are able to. In this case, I believe you can use multiple cheat items during your play session as opposed to Yakuza 3 where you could only use one. So you can do that as well, but I don't really think you need that many cheat items for this one. You will just get it after some time. Next is Koi Koi, and oh man, let me tell you. In this one the trick to get the bet amount does not work, since the way that this one actually works is that when you've won a certain amount of rounds, at the beginning you will be able to increase the difficulty, which in tandem increases the amount of chips that you can bet. As such, this one can be quite slow. I have some extra tips for Koi Koi, given that I had to do it for a while. The first one is that if you don't change the rules, you are playing 3 rounds, and if for some reason your opponent just gets an insane amount of points that are gonna equate to you probably losing the round overall, if you quit the game before he gets his points tallied, you will not only not lose any chips, but you will save yourself the time and patience of having to do that knowing that you were probably going to lose the round anyways and get no profits. Sometimes an easy way to win a hand is to just get 10 of a specific set, and that gets you junk. I would recommend that if you are able to get the moon card, the one that has the moon and has a red sky, there's a lot of combinations that get you good points with that one. So if you have it on your initial deck or if it's in the table, try to take that card. Again, I'm no expert in playing this game, nor do I know the hands, but I found out that taking that one can be quite beneficial to you. And it might be quite annoying to actually get all the way to 20,000 points. There is no cheating item in this one, so you just have to keep at it. Likewise, Oicho-kabu is kind of the same. This is the one where you have to get as close to 9 as possible and you go against the current banker. Once again, there is no way to increase the difficulty besides just playing, and eventually you will be able to increase it yourself and the betting amount. Thankfully this one you just need to get 10,000 instead of 20, which is a relief because this one is way easier to lose and you don't win that many initially. And for all 3 of these there is 2 Haruka requests that want you to get a specific amount of chips more than what you began. So if you began say at 2000, you want the amount that she asked for, either if it's 1000 or 1500 or whatever. Just make sure you leave the table after you have that much more, and that should complete it. Next up we move to the casino ones. For Haruka's purposes, she only activates in the Fukuma casino in the underground purgatory, so take her there. You need to enter via Kamurocho Hills since she won't go in the manhole. Roulette is pretty easy, you just need 20,000 cumulative points, but thankfully not only do we have 1, not only do we have 2, but we have 3 zero jewels. Remember that this item makes it so that only 0 or double 0 land, so just save, go bet all your amount in a single one, and if you don't get it, reload. That will get you 36,000 chips and pretty much just set you for anything that you need in chips or money for the rest of the game. So yeah, that's that. Haruka has 2 requests for this, but they're really easy to do. Next is poker, and I actually got a little bit confused myself when doing this one. The completion reward says to earn a specific amount of chips in a single play session, and the Haruka request is to earn a specific amount of chips before you leave. My confusion is that I thought that both meant kind of the same, so for example her second request asked you to get 5,000 or more chips, and I was still missing the 10,000 chip completion, so I tried really hard for like over an hour until I got like several good hands, played my cards right and got a good amount of winnings, and then I left. But turns out that I didn't really need to do this one. There are 2 Royal Joker cats in the game. I think you can beat her first request, which is only 2,000 points more from where you started, on your own if you play your things right. But for the other one I would suggest you use both of your Royal Jokers. Now as for the actual completion, you will need to play for a little bit in a single table, but pretty much every time that you win, that amount gets summed out to the total. Your losses do not count, so if you earn 3,000 chips and then you lose 2,000, you're still in the 3,000 positive. You just need your total winnings to be more than 10,000 before you leave the minigame, and that should get you the completion reward. Next is Blackjack, which also asks for 10,000 in a single game. Thankfully there's also several Blackjack amulets in the game, and Haruka has requests for this too, so you can just pop it, win for 5 rounds and leave. It shouldn't be hard. Next we have Baccarat, which I believe in the mainline games, not counting the PS2 ones, had been missing since Kiwami, so I assume that this was actually the first time that it was added into the series. The way that you play this game is that it's similar to Blackjack in a little bit, where there's gonna be the player and the banker's cards. However, in here you actually bet in one of the two or a tie, and the one who gets closest to 9 wins. But you don't have to worry about it because there's 2 cheat items that are the banker amulets and the player amulet. You just have to use one of them and bet all of your chips in the one that's gonna win, and it's just that simple. You can get the completion reward from the single betting on a player, and that's it. Haruka requests 2 of these games, so you simply use your amulet in each of them and that should get it for you. Next is the UFO Catchers. These ones aren't that bad like some other games. I believe most of the prizes aren't terrible to get. There are several series, if you would call them like that. The first one are the chickens, or Pio-chan. There's 4 different colors of the smaller ones, and then there's the big Pio-chan. I noticed that the black Pio-chan only appears to spawn in this type of machine, where you need to get the big one out of the way and then you're able to get to the black one, which is a little bit deep. I found some setups where the blue and pinks were just out in the open, so try to roll that one by entering and exiting the Sega arcade until you get it. I think that black one could be the hardest one to get, but overall not that terrible. There is II from Monkey Ball. There is some characters from 777 Town. One is called Manjiro, which has an afro, and the other one is called Syrup. Now there is a golden version of Manjiro, and this seems like only appears in the Nakamichi Alley Sega arcade, so try to go there to get it because it's not on the theater one. Then we have Hitonian, which is the cat from the Karaoke. He has 3 faces, the normal, disappointed and happy one. Then there's a series of like dogs, and there are a big version and a small version. Sometimes you may find only the small ones, but there are some other setups where you're gonna have both the big and the small ones stacked on top of each other. There's 4 dogs, which are the Golden Retriever, the Shiba, the French Bulldog and the Chihuahua, so just make sure you get all 8 of them. And the final type of prize are some sort of bar snacks. Now there's actually 3 types, one is purple colored, the other ones are red and orange. You may think that the red and orange look almost the same, so I would suggest that you get both of the sides of the snacks that you see when you get this setup. I think they all span at once, but I wasn't sure what I was missing, and turns out that one was orange and one was red, and I thought they were the same. But overall I don't think they are really complicated to get any of the prizes. Maybe the black chick, because it only spawns on those spaces where you need to like dig from it, but it's not that terrible honestly. Continuing on the Sega arcade, we have Boxcelios 2 and 1. Remember, you unlock 1 by having Akiyama become friends with a Sega employee and he will take out the cabinets. Now in both you need to score to level 50, just like before. Haruka will ask requests only for Boxcelios 2. Boxcelios 1 works exactly the same like it did in 3, So if you played it and mastered it there, I don't think it should be all that difficult. I literally first tried it at level 50 in that one. Boxcelios 2 is a little bit more interesting. It works kind of the same, but this time around I feel like there's more 3D to the movement of the ship. And the good thing is that now, instead of just getting time frozen when you defeat it in the first 2 seconds of a level, you will actually gain an additional second if you manage to not lose time. So this makes it a little bit more easier to progress through the things, because if you're able to get the first few levels, say like the first 10 or 15 levels like this, then you will have 45 seconds in total to spend. Some of the stages will be a bit harder and will take some of your time, so that's the idea behind this. It took me a little bit to get used to the game, but when I actually got it, I got to like level 85, so I don't think it's that bad. The fact that you can actually gain time helps immensely. Then we get to some more boring ones for some people. In Shogi you need to just win 5 games, so what I recommend is get a Shogi app on your phone, pick the easiest opponent, get him to go first, and then just replicate everything that he does on your turn in a Shogi app on your phone, then follow the CPU until you win. It's not a perfect strat and sometimes you may get lost in between doing that, but it's honestly the easiest thing that you can do. Then you have Mahjong, and oh man, I actually had such a bad luck in this game. I don't know why. The requirement is to get 50,000 points in a single game. What this means is that since you start with your bet of 25,000 at the beginning, you need to pretty much win the round and have 75,000 or more points in that thing at the end where the scores are tallied. Only then is where it counts. Now, I saw a thread on the Steam discussion forums where apparently it seems like the game rigs some luck in your favor the first time that you play Mahjong in this game. I actually only played it onto Premium Adventure, and I do believe I did get a little bit lucky on the first time that I played, but not enough to get this. So maybe save and just keep trying until you get this. Of course, this is assuming that you actually know how to play the basic Mahjong. The thing is, I didn't get the completion reward right away, even though I know the basics, and I actually had to learn a little bit more than what I knew. Like, I learned the basics of Mahjong in 2020 when I was playing Yakuza 0, and that had served me all throughout these years and playing up until 4. Heck, the requirement for Yakuza 3 is the exact same one, and I did that one first try if I remember correctly. But this one actually costed me like 10 hours or so of playing. Now, it's not like I hate Mahjong, so I was half enjoying myself, but also it was a little bit frustrating that I kept losing sometimes, or I don't know. So that's why I had to learn some more advanced rules into how to actually manage to steal tiles and actually still be able to win my hands. But, well, what I would recommend for you is that hopefully you haven't touched the mode and do it for the first time. There's one achievement where you need to win with the 7 pairs hand. Now this one is really easy. I mean, you need the right pieces, but you can do it on your own. Just need 7 pairs and that's it. I've heard that a lot of people actually get it like the first try that they play, so maybe you are lucky. If you get 4 pairs, then go for it from the beginning hand. But that's it for Mahjong. Getting into the final ones, next is the batting center. I dreaded this one for the longest time, and as such it was the very last thing that I did. But in reality, my fear was unfounded, and that's because they added multipliers in this game. So they actually quite modified the batting center a lot. The setups for the games are very different, and they added multiplier bonuses, so if you hit multiple planets at once, you will get a multiplier depending on how many you hit, and this applies if you complete a bingo as well. As such, the scores that you can get are way higher, and that's what the requirements are also high. All in all, I believe it is easier to hit the timings on this game. I feel like either Yakuza 2 was way too precise or a bit harder to get it, because in this one I just try to do the timings that I had mentalized and I get them almost every time, whereas even when I did practice recently in Yakuza 3, it was still a little bit hard sometimes, so maybe they improved that, I am not quite sure. Anyway, you have 4 difficulties to go. On the easy one, there is only a 3 grid of targets, so you can hit 2 at the same time and then an additional one. At that point you'll be at 250 points, and then hitting the red target gives you an additional 300. The completion score is 2300 points, so all in all I believe you need to hit like 12 shots including the red targets, and maybe like an additional shots after that. It's not that hard, and the speed distribution of this one is relatively easy, so I don't think it should be a problem. For the normal stage we have 5 different targets. You can target 3 at once and then the additional 2. The red target is once again 300 points, so you should have about 690 by this point. Once again repeat this set like 4 times and then some additional points, and that should be it. I also didn't have to struggle with this one. There's a request from Haruka on this one, but she only wants you to hit 10 balls, which should be acquired when you get the score. Next, on the hard stage, we go back to our traditional 3x3 grid. Due to how the multipliers work in this game, the easiest thing is to do the 1, 5 and then 9, and then follow up by hitting the corners that will hit the remaining 3 targets on both ends. This only takes 5 balls, and by the time you're done you will have 1500 points. The red target gives you 400 on this stage, but you don't even need it. Just repeat the first thing that you did twice and you'll be above the 3000 required score. Haruka wants you to get only 2600, so this should be a breeze as well. Finally, the extra hard stage can be a little bit difficult to get at first, so let me explain. You have a bigger board this time, a 5x5 one, so there's 25 panels in total that you have to hit. Due to how it's set up, it is possible to hit 4 at a time. However, it is a little bit hard, and I found a video from about 13 years ago. It was the only one that I could find in YouTube about this, and this guy mentions that in order to actually get the 4 to be hit, because sometimes you may only get 2, you have to like get the center of the 4 and then move your cursor slightly down and to the left. It needs to be just a tad bit, and you can see me here in the example doing it. If you do that, then you should be able to get the 4 at the same time. You need 3500 points for the completion, and Haruka asks for a whopping 4000 on this one, so a little bit more. The first time that I played this stage, and I would bet that other players had the same experience, you most likely would not be getting too many points even at the end of the game. And that's because this is where the multipliers can really help you. If you hit tiles randomly, then you may end up with about 1000 or so points, and you'll be wondering how the hell you can get 4 times that score to get the completion. Well, thankfully for you, I did manage to get a strat to get a good amount of points very fast, so I'm gonna share it here. I did post a video specifically about this only, but it was only the gameplay, so let me explain. I believe the hardest thing in this stage is actually managing to land the 4000 ones rather than actually getting the points. And that is because if you do mess up, then your score can be hindered, but well, it depends on how you do it. Here's a strat that I figured out. I started from the bottom left corner and hit the 4 tiles that were there. Then I went to the opposite side and hit only 2. That leaves 4 in the middle of there, and hitting those would trigger feeding 4 tiles and getting 2 bingo rows, so you get a bunch of points. Next I went on the upper part and hit just 2 of the tiles, and then the 4 that would be left under it. Once again, this gets you a multiplier for the bingos that you do. Next you go to the corner that has nothing and hit just 1 tile, then the 2 below, then the 2 that remain in the topmost row, and finally you should be having a big glaring hole roughly in the middle that you can hit by 4 at the same time. If you manage to hit this hit with the 4, you will get a whopping 1520 points at once. Quite insane, and it is because we have a ×4 multiplier plus all of the bingos that we're hitting. If you get this setup perfectly, then you will already have 3800 points, and you're only missing a couple of extra shots to get the 4000. You're already over the completion mark, so for Haruka it just needs a little bit of an extra shot. The red target gets you 500 points in this difficulty, but even if you miss it, it's not like you really need it. Just with 9 shots without too much pressure you can get 3800 and just hit some extra 2s or 4s and that's it. Again, I believe what's harder in this stage is actually practicing and getting to hit the 4 at the same time. I feel like people should be struggling more with that and getting that one down, and then the score will just come in naturally. I do have to give credit to the GameFAQs guide that everyone references, because it's them that told me about the multiplier things, but they don't exactly specify how to construct the rest of the shot, so I did come with that one myself. But yeah, and that is the batting center. I mean, the addition of the multipliers makes it much easier, which is a great thing, because after having to hit almost a perfect game in Yakuza 3, this is a fresh breath of air. The second to last minigame is golf. You can access the golf course by any taxi during the day only. For completion, you need to get -5 on a tournament, which could be a little bit troublesome, so the idea here is to actually learn the holes properly. Now, you would say that if you had mastered golf in the previous game, then you were all set, but unfortunately it's not quite that simple. For some reason that I don't really understand, they altered how the golf works in this game. Like, the controls straight up changed. You used to be able to move your direction with the bumpers, and now it's with the analog, and I don't really get it, but okay. Now instead of holding the A button for your power gauge, you have to tap it multiple times. One to begin, one to select your power, and then one to actually hit your final shot once the reticle comes back. I don't really get why they changed it, but it takes a little bit of getting adjusted to it before you are able to get in the zone for it. So I'm gonna give some pointers as for every hole. I feel like that's the easiest way. So for the first hole, you wanna hit it probably with most of your force and get it around this area. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Your next shot should be aimed close to the hole itself, and hopefully you land on the green. If you manage to land on the green, then depending on how close you are, you may be able to get a birdie. If not, then hopefully you get a par with 4 shots and move on. Honestly, I feel like the first hole is harder than it should be, but oh well. For hole number 2, I like to change my club to the one that pretty much leaves the reticle on the hole. I always do 2 spins to the back, because if you don't add spin, it will go over the green, and then just throw the ball. Try to get the best timing so that it's close, and then again, if you got a very decent shot, you may be able to get a birdie with 2 shots in this one. If not, then it's also possible to just get the par with 3 shots and continue to move on. This one is not as hard, so trying to aim for that birdie is recommendable, but I get it if you don't get it always. For hole number 3, be mindful of the wind and make sure you get your first shot roughly in the edge of this greeny patch in here. If you go into the deeper areas of the grass, then that's bad news, so hopefully you land near the edge of this thing. On your second shot, you hopefully get it into the green and close to the hole. Now unfortunately, this one is kind of slanted in the whole area, and many holes in this course, in this game, are like this actually, so that's a little bit of luck in here, but if you're lucky you may be able to get the birdie here. If not, then try to go for the par. Pretty much just try to score 0 or less. If you get a plus in any hole, just reset, because it's gonna be really hard to get that back. Hole 4 is not that bad, but be mindful of the tree. Either try to just aim it away from the tree, or sometimes your ball may actually hit the tree, but if it lands on the greener area, then you're fine. Again, if it lands on the deep grass, then you're screwed. Your second shot should be able to get it into the green, and then your third shot hopefully gets it in. Hole number 5, your first shot should be as farther as you can to get it as close as you can as the flagpole. Then the second one, hopefully you get it in the green and on the more southern part of the hole, because if you go more to the north, it's slanted downwards and it's gonna be a bit harder for you to hit it. If you're a little bit behind, it's gonna be easier. Hole number 6, I don't think it's all that difficult, though again there's a little bit of slanted in the part of the hole, but you should be able to get really close with 3 or 4 shots. Now, as we are nearing the end of it, you hopefully have been accumulating -1s by the point of your run. If you have only 0 by this point, probably a reset would be good, because getting an eagle, it's possible sometimes, but not that much. Hopefully you did get lucky in some of the holes and were able to accumulate those negative numbers. Hole number 7 is similar to 2, just use a club that's pretty much almost on the point for the reticle, make your spin 2 times to the back, be mindful of the wind and then hit it. Depending if you landed it really good, then you should be able to get it in 2 shots. For hole number 8 you need to be careful because the game suggests that you can just full send it and it may arrive to the flagpole, but that's not true. There's a big pool of water in the middle and it will bounce in there guaranteed. So use your clubs and go back until the one that's just pretty much before the pond. Be mindful of the wind here and probably don't hit it with full power, just so you're able to get just before this greeny part. On your second shot you should be able to get it close to the green and then hopefully finish in 3 or 4. The final hole is a little bit similar to the one that Yakuza 3 had. On the first shot just full send it as far as you can so you guys can close. Second shot should try to get you into the little island in the green. And in this one there's a little bit of elevation where the hole is. You should be able to reach it from the front easily, but if you shot it too much it will fall to the back and roll down, so be careful of that one. If you hit it right here you could be able to get an eagle, though I don't entirely remember if I ever did, but yeah. And that's pretty much it for the main tournament. Again, there are some that are easier than others. My best shot is just to keep practicing at it and you will eventually get it. You might get lucky here and then, so that's what you need. HARUKA'S requirement is to get a game with +2 or less, so that's not that bad. You will probably get it as you're practicing for this, so just take her with you until it completes. Then we have the Nair pin tournament. There is no completion thing for this, but Haruka wants you to get a measly 500 points. It works pretty much the same as it did in Yakuza 3, though the hole is different, of course. I like to use this club in here, and honestly the only thing that I do every time, regardless of the win, is add 2 spins to the back and try to get the right timing on full sending it. You only need 500, so if you had landed a 150, that's only 3 shots. Even if you screw up and you get the lower stones, you have 10 shots, so I guarantee you can get this one unless you're really bad. I literally got it first try exactly on 500, and on my try here on recording this I got it again, so it's not hard. After I had to do pretty much perfection in Yakuza 3, I'm not scared of this. And then the final one is fishing. You can go to the docks at any time using a taxi, and in fact different fish do tend to spawn in different times of the day, so you may need to change the time sometimes to get all of the fishes. There's 18 things in total that you need to get, that include the pieces of trash that you can get. You can buy bait from the guy that's sitting there in the docks, so it's better to go with a semi-empty inventory and just buy from him what you want. I think in between worms, manila clams and lobsters you can get most of the distance of the entire range for the different species that you need to get. Now there are some that are common and they might give you a little bit of trouble, probably not that much, but you will notice that they move a little bit. If you get something that doesn't really move, then it's probably trash. And if you have already collected all of the trash fishes, you can simply just fully reel in the rod so that it just goes away and you don't waste time trying to catch obvious trash. And then there's the really hard ones. Most of them are in the far end of the thing, around 120 to 150 meters, though there are some that are a little bit harder to and are closer. There is actually 2 musics for the fishing in this game. When you hear this one, that means it's a most common thing, or trash, so it depends on what you need that you can go. If you're only missing some of the harder ones, then you probably can let this go. If you hear this music instead, then that is the hard one. The way that I believe it works is that depending on the distance, certain fish can't spawn, and they're more likely to bite if you stop your meter when there is a fish silhouette. Remember that you can reroll the positions of fishes that you see in there by simply entering and exiting the minigame. For your information, in the farther distance, if you have the easy song, then it's most likely a giant crab or trash. So if you're looking for the harder ones like the Maguro or the Marlin, and you get the easiest music, then you can just ignore it and try again. I believe that the fishing overall is easier in this game. Like, I still believe when I caught my first Maguro in Yakuza 3, that actually took me 10 minutes because it was so hard to juggle it to and from, having to reel in and then give it a little bit of space to recover my meter, I believe they made it much easier in this game. So it's more like a matter of getting all of the things that you need to spawn, rather than actually having to struggle with them too much. Even the longest catches aren't that terrible, in my personal opinion. Haruka will have 2 requests for this. The first one is a giant crab, which can appear mostly late. If you ask for tips, she actually will say that they like some bait, but don't listen to that, because the bait that she tells you cannot actually reach those areas. So I personally just use lobsters instead. And remember, if you're looking for the giant crab specifically, it's gonna play the normal music on the farthest areas. Then you need to get a marlin, and as I had mentioned, you also need a marlin for the weapon modding, but you do not get to keep the one that you give Haruka, so you need to do it twice. This one spawns at the end, so it could either be a marlin, a coelacanth, or a tuna, so hopefully you get lucky and you get the one that you need. They are the hardest ones to catch, but as I said, compared to Yakuza 3, I don't believe they are as hard. And that's it. That is everything that you need to do in Yakuza 4 Remastered. A bit anticlimactic maybe? I mean, thankfully there is no insane requirement of getting 30 million yen or something like that, because my god, as I said beforehand, that was my biggest fear in Yakuza 3 Remastered, and ultimately what took most of my time to get. But yeah, there's no such thing in this game, so that's it. I think I pretty much mentioned most of the achievements of the game. You have probably seen them on the screen. Some of the ones that I haven't is like getting all characters to level 20. This should be pretty easy with Hostesses and IF7R probably. Kamurocho's Stampede King, you need to knock over 100 pedestrians. You can only knock out men, and usually when you walk them by behind. It's a little bit hard to do if you are not actively seeking for it, so you probably won't get it by naturally playing. Walking Bank, which is to possess 10 million yen, you can just reclaim all of your casino and gambling points into platinum plates and sell them to get this one. You can also get the Akiyama one that I will mention in a second with it. Memo Masters, so the memos you get them from talking with the people with blue arrows over their head. You can see them mostly everywhere in Kamurocho, and you might get them through the story. There is one guy on the western side of the rooftops that you might miss if you're not actually looking for that one. But besides that, I think most of them are really easy. You just need to go into the memo screen and the achievement should pop up if you have everything else. And then there's the character specific achievements, like for Kiryu destroy 100 weapons that you pick up while you fight. I suggest fighting near the Millennium Tower because there's a lot of items in there. Tanemura the Gambler acquired 10,000 casino points playing as Tanemura. You need to win them, you can't just buy them, so I would recommend just winning with a Zero Jewel as Tanemura. Even if you have to save and reload your file, it doesn't really matter, it's the easiest way to get it. Purchase 5 ghosts as Sajima. I don't know if you do this by default when getting the materials for weapons, but if you want you can just save buy 5 of the handguns from the weapon vendor and then reload your save file. And Akiyama the Hoarder, earn a million yen playing as Akiyama. You can sell most of your stuff and get this one. If you have redeemed for gambling items, just make sure that you are playing as Akiyama when you sell them, and that should get you the achievement. There's also the limit battles, which is like ultimate challenge in other games. The most annoying one that I remember was one where you play as Akiyama and you have to go through the oil segment that Tanemura plays. That one can be annoying because you really need to learn the movement to get through the level fast and beat up the enemy at the end. But besides that, I didn't really struggle in any of the other ones. And overall, that's it. So it wasn't as hard, honestly, and it's weird because there was a friend that told me that this is the second hardest Yakuza game to complete, and I was assuming that the first one was 7, which I have heard that it is quite hard indeed. But I don't think so. I personally believe that 3 was way harder. Again, this one, I feel like they made some of the minigames easier, the requirements are easier, or the CPUs are just dumber than they were in 3, so I didn't really have that much of an issue with it. And also this time around there wasn't an entire year gap from me playing it. I pretty much did all of this like within a month. I beat the entire thing with all the completion, so yeah, it also didn't take too much of my time. I mean, I spent a good amount of time playing, but I didn't elapse it over a lot of actual time. But that's it. I believe this video ended up being way larger than I expected, and I did do a re-recording of about half of it because I just went on and on in many tangents. But I think it's gonna be okay when I get to editing it. I hope you do enjoy it. I don't know if I will continue making this for Yakuza 5 or 6. Probably not gonna be as required, and I think after that Yakuza games are widely covered, so my aim with this type of videos is usually to cover a topic that's not that discussed, but if there is a lot of coverage for upcoming stuff in the games that I play, then it's probably not something that I would focus on. But anyway, this has been the video. I really do hope you enjoyed. Yakuza games are some of the biggest ones that I like to play and complete, but I may do videos like this for some other type of games in the future. Who knows, so feel free to subscribe if you want to check that out. For now, I believe that's it, so don't forget, you're always welcome in my town. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.